Greetings, Ashes of Creation community. I am Aggelos, founder of the Dungeon Crawler Network and From the Ashes. I wanted to give a quick introduction to this podcast episode because at the very first part, we had a special interview with Steven Sharif, creative director of Intrepid Studios and Ashes of Creation. He took the time to give us a quick interview to talk about some of the PAX feedback and impressions and stuff like that. It's just a nice 10 to 15 minute interview, nothing too elaborate like any of our past interviews, because we had to make time between when he was available to do a little question and answer and running between live streams. Now, the reason why I wanted to mention it was because this was recorded live from the PAX floor. If you've ever been to PAX, you know that it is very loud, and at some point during the interview, you can actually hear the announcement speaker going off about something or another. I did my best to remove as much noise as possible and to make it as clear as possible. We were also using Skype over the cellular network, so at one point it got a little crackly as well. I am sorry for that. Unfortunately, you can do what you can do with what you're given. But I definitely am very appreciative of Steven's time and thankful that he was able to get this interview for us. As well, a shout out to Telchar of Sons of the Seven, who is also on this podcast in the later half when we do a little recap. He was nice enough to actually bring the equipment to allow us to do the interview in the first place. So shout out to him, and I hope you enjoy the short little interview before moving into the podcast as a whole. Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I'm Aggelos, and I am joined by the one, the only Steven Sharif, creative director over at Intrepid Studios. How are you, sir?
I am good. How are you doing, Aggelos?
Doing great. And I really appreciate you taking a couple quick minutes while you're out there at PAX to talk to us real quick. And a special thank you to Telchar of Sons of the Seven for setting us up while he's out there at PAX. It's really appreciative of that. I guess first off, I just want to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about your experience thus far at PAX? Like, what has been the general reaction that you guys have been seeing from the game thus far?
Honestly, the reaction from people who have been trying out the game has been unbelievable. I mean, they've come out of this knowing that Ashes of Creation is going to be a future monster in the MMORPG industry. They cannot believe that what we're showing here today is pre-alpha, and they cannot believe that it is less than 3 months from our Kickstarter that we're actually here. Center stage at PAX with a giant booth and an awesome arena to play and an open world experience that I have narrated by our GMs, actually taking them through and letting them see what it's going to feel like to be in Ashes of Creation. It has been an amazing response from the community so far.
Absolutely. I can say I've seen quite a few videos that a few people like Sinbad from Vengeance have been taking, as well as what has been done on the live stream. And I know I've worked at DCN with several indie developers in the past, and I am blown away by the progress you guys have made in such a short amount of time. It is actually remarkable to see. So, like, I'm curious, like, what types of feedback have you been getting from both your, like, PvP and PvE experiences, respectively? Like, which one has been more favored? Have people been given any good feedback on those?
Yeah, people have been giving very good feedback. Actually, I think, though, that probably the most positive feedback is coming from the PvE open world experience, and I think it has something to do with the fact that it's been basically narrated by a GM, whereas in the arena they're just getting thrown into a 4v4 and told to kill each other. Now, they're still having an awesome time with that, having a lot of fun, but I think it's a little bit more personal probably for people going through our open world experience.
Mm-hmm. I see. Cool. So, like, I know based on all the feedback that you've been getting so far, has any feedback reached out or touched you, like, to a point where you're like, that's a really good idea, and are planning on adapting any of that into your current designs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when we implemented or showcased, the QuickTime event that's available in one of our skills, I think that maybe it wasn't rolled out probably as well to the community who's not present here at PAX, to our Ash's new one Discord and through YouTube through the video release. Because you know, when you're playing it, it is actually kind of enjoyable to have that as opposed to an auto attack. But with that being said, any type of quick time event requires really whoops, hold on. Can you move the food at No, at 10 a.m. Sorry about that. Excuse me. Any type of quick time event requires a masterful UI. And our UI is honestly very bare bones. It is our pre-alpha UI. So the translation there from a video standpoint is not going to be as good. But the most important thing to understand is this is an iterative process. Meaning this is honestly our pre-alpha, our first iteration. So when we move into our alpha phases and people get hands-on, it's going to be much better to get that feedback from people who experience the system rather than just having seen it.
Yeah. Now, and it's funny that you brought up, like you said, the combo mechanic, and I'm glad that you did so, because that was something that a lot of people had been mentioning right off the bat. And you know, based on anyone who's been part of any type of MMO development or has followed MMO development will know that, yeah, obviously everything being iterative and the idea of bringing that level of conveyance to a character is important. Being able to show what you want to display to a character and how they should react to it. So obviously UI being, you know, something that can be changed over time. Now, I know and I understand that. Now, the only real criticism that, you know, I actually agreed with and I actually have a concern about, and I'm curious how you plan on handling it, is with any type of quick time event, obviously when you're expected to have a certain level of reaction, latency does play an effect. How do you guys envision that affecting your combo system?
Absolutely. That's a good question. So, you know, that was something that I posed to my engineers before we even went down the rabbit hole and then the quick time event and the latency and how that will affect players in large either group battles or players who may not have the best internet connections or certain things. And their response to me was that we are capable of actually determining the latency of our players, our clients, right? And we can offer a error window, basically, when they're using this quick time event that can accommodate for that latency. So it actually adjusts the latency on the client's end when inputting these commands, sending packets back to us.
Awesome. We know that during the PvE experience that, you know, it was catered to show off the various out-of-combat skills from each class. Another criticism or concern, I should say, that has been expressed is about a need to have all classes in a group to make sure that you can experience all the out-of-combat effects. But knowing that finding one of every class is not always possible at all times, how do you guys envision groups combating these environmental effects when a class, when the class out-of-combat counter isn't readily available?
Well, that's actually another good question. The deal with these utility skills is that we want the world to be more engaging, not just in a combat setting, but also in a discovery-like setting. I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons player, a big Pathfinder player. I love pen and paper RPGs, and I wanted to give players that feeling in the MMO RPG, right? I wanted them to experience that. So it's not exactly required to have every role present when you're going through the role. Mm-hmm. Will you be able to overcome every hazard or find every clue if you don't have access to all the utilities? You won't be able to. But at the same time, that's not necessary for accomplishing your goal and task. It will just make it a little easier.
Right. I know I drawed an analogy to an old PS2 game, Baldur's Gate 2, because, you know, in that one you picked a class that you'd be able to play, or a race class combo, and it was a co-op game, so you could have like two players playing. One thing that made me think of is if you were playing the Dwarven Rogue, he could unlock doors or disarm traps. if you didn't play him, you just had to find the key or, you know, as I always said, run through that hallway and just hope not to die. Like, you could get through it. It just made it easier if you had the rogue there to disarm traps. Otherwise, you're just, you know, run and heal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a good example. I think one of the earlier things that we said to the community when we were talking about Ashes of Creation and just the identity of the game is that, you know, not everybody's going to get a trophy. Not everybody can do everything. You can't be a master of everything. There's going to be interdependency that's available, and that kind of creates a very healthy community when players will have to think about their party composition. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do those things. It just means it's going to be a little bit harder.
Absolutely. Last couple questions I have here. I know that you guys have a panel coming up. I mean, are you guys excited about the panel at PAX? Like, do you have any things that you wanted to talk about at the panel that you're excited to share with the community?
Well, we have 3 reveals. One we've actually leaked early, which is the release date of our Alpha Zero.
Mm-hmm.
The other 2 refer to our composer and the name of the world in Ashes of Creation. So we're pretty excited to get that information out to players. And then also just giving them a recap of what it was like, honestly, to start Intrepid Studios and to go through the process of bringing together a passionate team and going into Kickstarter and the experiences that we've had with the community through this whole process. It's just going to be, I think, a fun thing to kind of share.
Absolutely. And it's funny, the last question you had is about Alpha Zero coming in December, which I know a lot of the raffle winners and stuff like that, that's how you get into Alpha Zero. So by signing up over at ashesofcreation.com, you get entered into weekly drawings. So for Alpha Zero coming in December, can you tell us a bit more about like what your roadmap is for that? Like, I know that you have these 2 separate experiences, which are very ad hoc now for the PAX. What is your kind of roadmap for Alpha Zero, and what should players expect when they hop into Alpha Zero for the first time in December?
Alpha Zero is really going to try to give a taste of these core systems and Ashes of Creation to the players who are participating, allowing us to get some pretty valuable feedback from the winners of these Alpha Zero rounds. Really, what we want to do is test our login servers. We want to test capacity in these servers. We want to get a working idea of these mechanics as they can appear in a group dynamic, as they can appear in our open world system with outside players, not knowing what to do, have a sense of progression that's going to be available as well. So it's going to be an extension of what we're presenting here at PAX. It's going to allow people to log in together for a period of time and just explore this world that we've created and allow them to get a taste for what it's going to be like.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Steven, I know you guys are busy, and we kind of hit that point. So thank you so much for showing up and being here with us. I can hear the announcement in the background. So good luck at PAX, and we really appreciate you coming out.
Thank you, Aggelos.
Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am the founder of the Dungeon Crawler Network, that would be Aggelos, and with me, once again, Telchar, our guild leader of the Sons of the Seven. How are you, sir?
Doing fine. It's been a long 2 days of PAX adventures, but still got 2 more to go, so...
Yeah. A lot of the initial images that have been thrown around the official Discord has been taken by this man right here. He's been on the floor going crazy down there at PAX West in Seattle. So I really appreciate you taking the time to actually sit down with me, and we're going to do a little bit of a post day 1 and 2 recap of the PAX Ashes of Creation experience. So first off, I guess... just generally, like, have you been to PAX before?
I've been to PAX South 2 times. I haven't been to PAX West yet because there was no real reason for me to come. You know, would have been a nice trip before, but it would have just been kind of an experience thing. Now that I got an opportunity to come to West and then be a kind of more on the ground booth experience with the developer, it's a lot more of a hands-on and, you know, really fun to see the team work like that. And, you know, it's a different experience being able to actually chat with them like that and kind of work with them versus just going and doing the experience and not really getting to know people. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So what has been your general impression so far from PAX? I know they've been streaming a lot, and one of the things they did, they just turned their Twitch channel on and left their camera just face out, and I've been looking at the crowds and stuff, and it's been pretty impressive to see the length of the line that has been at the Ashes of Creation booth.
Yeah, I was kind of like a little bit worried when I was, you know, coming to the event first time because we had no idea what it was going to be like. You know, there's the kind of you can call it the virgin mentality or whatever you want to call it. Like, you know, you don't know what they're going to be like. You don't know what how they're going to their attitude, that kind of stuff. And then also how well people are going to receive it. But I guess one of my big first impressions was like when I first walked in the hall on Thursday, you're walking down the aisle going towards the section of the arena that they're in, and their booth stands out way better than a lot of the other booths does because it's so, like, it's really it's impactful and it's kind of mysterious the way that they have the banner. I think put a few pictures of how it looks from a distance, and I have a couple walkthrough videos that I'll be putting up as well later that really show off, like, if you're just kind of looking around and you turn the corner, you see like this thing off in the distance, you're like, what is that? And you go down to it because it's way different design than a lot of the other booths out there that would be selling a similar kind of game. It's got like the black lights on it, the arch on it glows really well, as well as it's just been crazy busy too. So if you're just walking around, you see this thing that you've never heard of before. Like a lot of people obviously have never seen or heard of the game, and when you are a fresh person to it and you see it and you're like, wow, what is this? So you come and ask questions and stuff, and it just, a lot of people had never heard of it before. And that first impression of how good the booth looked was really critical to, I think, leaving people with, even if passerbys, with like, this is a really serious gig. They know what they're doing. And that was just like my kind of viewership impressions. I'd also say like getting to actually meet the team in person and really get to know them was really good for me because it kind of showed me that they really are serious about what they're doing and that they are super passionate about the game. And they also have a really awesome like teamwork synergy within their group, and they like to joke around and have a lot of fun together too. And that's really important, I think, to have a successful, healthy team. You know, it's just been a really good experience to get to you know, make friends with them basically. So
right. I mean, I could see that level of personality, I guess, from several of the streams where I wish I could remember their names and I feel really bad now, but it wasn't even when they were actually officially supposed to stream, but two of the artists hopped on the stream, like commandeered the mic from Bacon himself, and where they did like an impromptu Q&A. That was actually really cool because they seem like really interesting people. So but I know just from the pictures you had sent, you know, this is an indie company, for, you know, lack of a better word. You know, but they definitely, just from the booth experience that we've seen from the pictures, it looks like a AAA studio was funding the money, throwing that in there to get those booths up. You know, this is something along the lines of what we would see from EA or, you know, Bethesda sometimes. Yeah. So Bungie's booth, like, it looks great. But they've been a company for forever, you know, so like this is just what Steven's throwing up to have as an experience, and it's just going to get better over time because they've, you know, thought about what they're missing, and, you know, if it's this impactful and this memorable already, like, time is going to show that they know Steven's a marketing guy. He knows what he's doing. So he's going to make it better next year. Like, for example, they didn't even have information pamphlets about the game. There was no physical product for people to take away from the game at all. Their business card is just a white Kinko's printer, like
Intrepid Studios, here's the contact info. That's it. It's like, wow. You'd think it would be somebody up on the top floor booth, like with just a little cordon behind a cloth thing with a little video playing. But no, they definitely put on a show, and the fact that they were able to do this demo in like 3 months or whatever it was since they started working on it and deliver it the way they did is a really big show for how strong they are as a team, in my opinion. So. Mm-hmm.
Now, the background video that I have going on here, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. This was actually from Sinbad. He's been on the show before. I think he was on episode 13, 15, and 17 of From the Ashes. So he's part of Vengeance, and he managed to send this video to us ahead of time because I wanted to use it as a backdrop for this. Because this is some of the first gameplay footage that we've seen. It looks like what they're doing, this is the PvE experience. But before we really talk about this video, what I wanted to ask you was, I know they had the two experiences. They had the PvP experience and then they had the PvP one. How many PCs total did they have? I know they said, I don't even remember.
So I believe there's 16 total, and then 2 GM stations.
Okay.
That was the 1 GM per PvE group as a, kind of like, it was a cleric, so that the people that were clerics that didn't know what they were doing, they survived the encounter because there's just no way people just didn't understand understand. Then they also had some cheats so that they could actually beat the content for people that weren't able to tank or DPS correctly, etc. But the GM stations were actually super critical, in my opinion, for how successful the PvE experience was, because the multiple different guys that were working on it, I think like Peter was on there for a lot.
Yeah.
Jeff would jump in sometimes. I think Steven may have even done it once as well, especially for like some of the media groups that had come through. He ran it for him. It was fun to listen to him kind of narrate the adventure and kind of really get into the role play of it, because that really helped keep the people engaged versus just going and doing like a blind demo.
Right.
And I think the engagement that the whole team had between greeting them at the front, asking questions from them, answering anything they had, as well as escorting them to the tutorial section, and then engaging them while they were waiting, and then moving them into their respective experience was a really important reason why it did so well. If it had been just a blind, come play this, no interaction, barely any help, thank you for your time, it would have been terrible.
Right. Especially this early on, something that a lot of games, especially, like I said, at this early in, I will say pre-alpha at this point, the concept of conveyance isn't there, the idea of what you're supposed to do, because it's really just base systems. If you throw someone in there, they'll sit there and scratch their head going, if there was quest dialogue, I'm sure it was very tiny or very little or whatever. And it was actually funny, as soon as you mentioned Peter, I know he's kind of hard to see because of the layout of our video stream, because our faces are on the one side. But as soon as you mentioned Peter, it popped to him because he was GMing the one thing, and Sinbad had managed to focus on him for a brief second. And there he is again as I speak to it. But so that's really cool. So which of the two things do you think was more popular, the PvP or the PvE experience?
The PvE was definitely more popular because I think there's a lot of people that are a little more timid about PvP in general and like RPGs for the story or whatever.
Yep.
We did get a lot of repeat PvP visitors that got to really know and learn the characters a lot. And you could see this actually by, I think some people even had 2 of the reward red hats when they came back through. They would have 2 of the Make MMOs Great Again hats on, and they're like, did you buy the first one? No, I've got it. They won it earlier, kind of thing. So they just did it a couple times so they could try out the different classes and stuff. So we were always needing people towards the end of the day so far to fill the PvP line, and sometimes the VIPs and the devs would even hop in to help fill the slots. So there was never a want for, or never a lack of spots for the PvP experience. The PvE one was always busy.
You're breaking up there a little bit.
All right.
Oh, there you go. You're good again.
Internet dropped out a little bit.
That's full. It's that hotel internet. I mean, you got to give it to Telchar here, being like on demand for me at this point. He's broadcasting from his hotel at the moment, so that's pretty cool. I mean, PvP, like you said, is always something that is intimidating. So it's funny that you mentioned that the PvP side would have been the least popular of the two experiences, because obviously a lot of the PvPers might have been hopping to other games at PAX, or I'm sure, like you said, we mentioned earlier the Bungie studio with Destiny 2, that probably drew a lot of the sole PvPers just because of what it is, the type of game that it is.
That, and there's a really funny coincidence, but adjacent to the Ashes booth was the H1Z1 booth. And a lot of the devs for Ashes have come from Daybreak in H1Z1, so they were cracking up about it the entire time. It was hilarious. So a lot of the FPS PvP people were over there, and you got a lot more of the kind of casual, more role-playing kind of focused, or the fantasy-focused people coming over to the booth for us. And one of the other kind of comments is that there's not really ever many MMOs especially launching MMOs at events like this, because one, you don't really have, it's like a more of a long-term experience versus a short kind of like repetitive one. Mm-hmm. Every shooter is relatively the same. Every MMOs are different because they have, classes, they have abilities, they have all this different stuff. So it's kind of a hard thing to do, to bring something to a con like that no one knows about, has never experienced before, never played before, and be that successful with it, in a live environment like that. So it's definitely a good shout out to the team that they were able to deliver a playable demo that was that fun, considering it's only 10% of what they're intending. So keep that in mind. If anyone has any doubts about what the project is moving towards, that they are able to deliver something like that with this little amount of time and have it be. So keep that in mind.
I mean, and this is something I want to throw in, because DCN does a lot of work with indie developers. They're actually one of my favorite people to work with, because, they don't have the large marketing budgets and stuff like that. So a lot of times you're getting direct access to the devs because they want to talk and promote their game and stuff of that nature. And from what I'm seeing, like based on when this thing started production in late 2016 versus what we're seeing right now as having playable, right? I mean, we talk about multiple MMOs that are indies that obviously not to belittle their achievements or whatever, because everyone is different at different points and are using different technologies. But I've seen other games take way longer to get to this point than what they have. Right. Way longer.
I think go ahead. Sorry, I was going to say, but the critical thing is that the big, all the art guys are really, really powerful in what they're doing, and they're really talented, but the core team knows a lot. I've drilled them on a lot of the topics that I know enough about game development to understand what they're doing, and they are very experienced and know how to do it with the right mission. And from my understanding is that, with typical AAA studios and stuff, there's a lot of mismanagement that goes on. Mm-hmm. And with the way that the team is set up now, it is go time. And they are 100% or 150% passionate behind the project, because they all want this to work and are so melded together. They mesh so well that it's able to do this, and they don't have any loss of energy. It's like the perfect kind of combo of synergy where they can work real hard and not have any, stress about it, because they just love doing it and they love working together. So that's just kind of my thoughts on it. So.
All right, so let's go ahead and break down the two different things that we've had so far. Let's start with the PvP side, because I'm actually kind of curious what your thought. Did you get a chance to actually play with the PvP experience?
Yeah, I did in every class for both experiences several times. PvP is, as it is, a little funny to play, because it's a simple kind of designed arena that doesn't really have a lot of depth to it. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're unfamiliar with the classes and the ranges that they can operate at, as well as the cooldown mechanics, and then unfamiliar with the combo system, At first, it was kind of clunky. It felt weird. But the more you got used to it and started to understand the line of sighting and stuff like that, and realize how the combos usually play out, because there's kind of a predictive to it. It's like one of 5 or 6, maybe up to 10 different spots on the variation of where the little fast time happens.
Yep.
As well as its different classes have different widths and pace at which the thing will scroll by. There's also something to be said of teamwork too. You know, teams that were working really well together. Some of the later guys that had run through it several times, you could see that they were starting to call out positions and, you know, hey, like, let's line of sight the guys over here, like root that guy, DPS the cleric. You know, you could see that they're starting to get a little bit of synergy going and, you know, communication over the comms that they had set up. And I can see it being, once the UI is more polished, once there's more depth to the skills and training, you know, you learn the characters better, I can see it as it is being very, very deep combat, because it's not just spam. It's not just like, I'll use WoW for example. You know, in arenas, it's like some classes was just like, you know, Frostbolt, for, you know, you hit the ability and then it's over. Like, you know, you do one or two things. That's all the combat is. It's like that's it. There's all these abilities, but you only use like 4 of them. You know, like,
right.
It's better to have a very refined ability selection and then work through them, and with revisions to the classes and having more functionality with the abilities, the talent systems, the depth of the combo system that I hope that they will leak out and talk about more soon, is what they're planning, that it will really help them get a, you know, that extra 90% of what they're trying to get to. And you can see what the potential is through that.
Right.
Basics that this was like like Steven said, a very tiny vertical slice of the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, clearly at this point in time, it was a very, very limited, very focused set of what we were looking at. And I mean, we've seen videos in past live streams that they've done, like where they showed off. I think they showed it what they called the Metropolis or the Desert Arena, which is the one that was available at PAX. But they also showed us a Winter Siege one at one point in time, and that one looked really neat. I don't think it was ready for PAX. I know they were kind of on the fence with it, like it's almost there, but not quite.
I can actually, to answer that question, they had 3 arenas that, you know, that Tristan made, and they are all working. But the reason why they didn't do it is for simplicity's sake. They wanted to just have it be as simple as possible, and that they could grind out to make sure that there was no issues like that might pop up at live. And they had the most testing on the sand arena, the desert arena, whatever you call it. Yeah. The other ones worked in testing, but you never know unless you're really trying to. You just got to set your scope right. You got to say, well, how many people are actually going to get to play through 4, you know, possibly 3 times through? So that doesn't really offer anything. They're either going to be blown away by it, be happy with it, or not like it at all, no matter what arena it is. So, you know, obviously they still have those assets. They can use it at other cons. They can release those as part of the alphas and stuff like that, and no problem. Like, the artwork is still there. It's not been lost. They just decided to kind of make sure that they delivered exactly what they wanted and get it done for the event. So,
right. Yeah, no, you are very right there. I mean, in this particular case, they probably could have done it just based on the fact that the PvP line was not as big as the PvE. But that's hard to predict. You don't know at that point what you're going to see, and you're right. You had a couple people going back and forth for the PvP side of things, and they did it a couple times. But I assume that the PvE arena was much harder to get into, and you probably didn't see a lot of repeat business unless it was someone who got in at the beginning of the day and then hung around and, you know, got in at the end of the day again. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It was a full day of wait for some people. Like, there were some people that waited almost 3.5, 4 hours to get to the final experience. You know, it wasn't like they were there at the beginning and then lasted all the way till the close. Yeah, we got through the line. The line rotated at least once, but, you know, it was a long wait because it's about 10 to 15 minutes per run, and, you know, depending on how good the people are at DPSing and killing the stuff, as well as how many times the GMs had to res them, the PvE experience was very deep, and it showed off all of the potential of mechanics. Like all the classes had their own little usable ability or whatever it was, whatever they call that.
And we'll talk about that when we get to it. But it's actually funny you mention it, because that's what's on the screen right now. So if you're watching in the background, it is the PvE experience. So we'll hop on that. So I guess overall the PvP experience, it was what it was. And I'm just actually curious, was there any PvPers who actually mentioned, did you happen to go about and talk to anyone or hear anyone's comments about what they thought about it from the PvP side of things? I mean, either both good or bad. And I don't even say bad because it's so early. We call it constructive at that point most of the time.
So a lot of the feedback from especially the repeat players that I had talked to was that they found it really fast paced, which it is. It just is kind of like there's a little bit of artificial constraints on you because there's not enough depth to there's no talents in place right now. It's just the abilities and stuff. So like there's no specializations or anything, as well as like the combo system is at its rudimentary form, which will in the long run become much deeper and much more, like fleshed out. Right now it's just it's basically just an auto attack right now. It doesn't really do much other than just generate the points to make your ultimate go off, which is, in the combat, some people said like the cooldown's too long and you can't use it enough. Yeah, that's the balancing decision they decided to make with that right now.
Right.
They did have a lot of commentary on the control scheme. The way that the one is placed is that you're never able to really reach your A key with the current setup because you're always having to reach up for one. So like going left is always a really pain. A lot of the non-MMO players had a lot of struggle hitting combos because they weren't used to WASD, especially if they're like a console gamer, as well as the people that weren't able to reach their whole from here all the way over to like 7 and stuff like that. So they're kind of like freak out. As well as like the tab targeting, people didn't understand that very much because there was just a little tiny reticle on the ground. And then a lot of like some of the guys like Goat and a few of the other VIPs that were there were helping people learn the controls better, like using double click with your mouse to move your character like you'd expect in MMOs, like where you can hold both down and move it, and then holding right click to turn the camera. And a lot of little tips like that people didn't know because they just weren't experienced with it. And to mine, this is kind of an aside, I haven't really seen an MMO being showcased a lot, like an RPG MMO showcased at a con in a long time as a first experience. It's unprecedented. And usually people don't do it, so that the control scheme is unfamiliar for a lot of people. So
right, MMOs in their very design are not, I guess I want to say, not impressive to show off because they're designed to be more of a long-term experience. It's like hopping into an MMO for the very first time. Even when we first hop into Ashes of Creation, what is the first thing you and I are probably going to do? Well, we need resources, so let's go chop down a tree a couple hundred times. That kind of experience, which is what these games are built upon. Right. Make it very hard for cons to kind of show them off in a favorable light to non-MMO gamers, because non-MMO gamers don't quite understand that mentality, and it takes a while to dig in.
I think one of the really big attractions was that the game is beautiful already with the limited amount of time that they've been able to put into the art. And after talking to like a lot of the art guys, is that being able to mash it up this fast and make it look as good as it was a pretty hard challenge for them, but they loved embracing it because that's the first thing people say is like the game is beautiful, like it looks really good, and this is with like first pass art that was like good enough, get it in, like like kind of stuff. So a lot of people comment about like I've seen the memes about like the mage face and the cleric face and stuff like that. You guys, you got to remember that like they didn't even have eyeballs like a week and a half ago on these characters. So like it's been a lot of work for them to get this done at this pace and deliver it without, to my knowledge, any critical bugs. It was working really well, and only a couple of just straight crashes from some weird stuff that had to get resets, and then they worked fine again. So
right. And two things. One, I'm going to hit on, but like you said, with the game looking beautiful, and I've been watching this video of the PvE combat like, I'm seeing the boss has mechanics, like it's running around doing phase transitions and stuff like that. And the animations, especially very early on, look really, really good. And I understand people who don't follow the game, you know, like we do, would come into it and go, all right, it looks unfinished, you know, expecting, oh, this out? Like, I actually remember watching the stream and hearing people go, so how do I get it? How do I buy it? When can I download it? Can I go home and download it now? And, you know, I think it was Bacon was at times like, you know, guys, this is like pre-alpha, you know, like, hold up. People were expecting at that point from PAX a finished or very close to finished product, whereas MMO developer or development cycle and the people who follow it know, wow, you should see where games are at this point in time normally. One game who's been doing really great, Crowfall, at this point in time, their very first playable demo was what they called their gray box version. There was no textures on anything, you know, like you go on into essentially a completely gray world with a gray silhouetted character, and that's what you were testing at the time. That's what they wanted to test, and obviously over a couple of years now they've really expanded out and it looks really great. But people don't seem to understand that level of development cycle and how long it takes to get these things going. So it looks really great for the time that it's at. Now, the second thing I wanted to hit on, and you mentioned during the PvP experience, and I find it funny because obviously from the live streams and stuff like that, people were showing off the combat videos. And a lot of the people who don't follow Ashes of Creation, one of their major complaints already was the combat. Oh, it looks too slow. Oh, it looks like a general, you know, basic MMO. So I find it funny that the people who actually were playing it, a lot of the comments were, it's fast paced, when a lot of the people watching it go, wow, it's so slow.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of one of those disconnects from, you're usually people unfamiliar with like how the controls are going will see it, and you kind of expect something like that to be super fluid because like they're used to, like, especially Unreal is that like Unreal Engine is usually used in a lot of like fighting games and stuff, so like you expect that kind of like the artwork seems like it wants to move quickly, like it wants to have a lot of the actions that you would expect out of like a fighting game, for example. And then one of the kind of like disconnects also is that, you know, all the while, like when you're having to manage like the combo system and then also the targeting and stuff like that, is that the players are also moving too. So there's a lot of other sensory overload. Maybe after playing for like 10 or 15 hours, I might be able to make that conclusion that the game is slow or fast, but with only the limited amount of play that I've had, is that it is fast paced when you are playing it. Maybe it's because I'm just a noob and can't control it the right way, but in reality, in practice, it's a lot more critical than what appears. So, right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's something with almost any MMO. A lot of the skilled players and stuff, it's faster paced just based on what's going on in your head, such as you're keeping track of buff timers and debuffs and things like that. So in your head, you're thinking, okay, you're doing stuff actively while playing, but it doesn't look like you're doing anything because you're counting off in your head and doing those kinds of things, those calculations. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the PvE experience. Now, what did you think about this? And obviously, anyone who's watching this video right now, who are listening to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, however you're listening to podcasts, there will be a link to both. You can watch this, or you can actually just watch the raw video that was sent to us as well, where you can hear the audio. I mean, it's con audio, so just note that. So you can sometimes hear people talking, and you can hear them explaining things if you watch just not this version, because I obviously stripped the audio out of it because I only need a backdrop, but you'll have links to those in the description of this podcast, so you can check that out. But while we're talking, you'll also be able to watch it. So PvE experience. I
really liked it. Obviously, it's a bottled thing that was entirely scripted, and it was very obviously the GMs led the entire thing. It was something that, given a free roam, nothing, you'd have been like, what's going on here? Like, so like there's no tutorial or anything. Like they basically just walked you like by hand through the whole thing. And, especially not going in without any like ability practice or anything. You basically just fighting the first monster with no idea what your abilities do unless you remember them, or you look them up. You could pull the little infographic thing up to show what what they did again in the game. But it felt very, I'll say fulfilling, because there's a kind of like good experience that the whole the environment was, with the whole being able to do it at the event like that. Maybe it's me, just I just want it to do good, so like I expect kind of like forced my reality to change around it. But
you're a biased opinion, obviously. Both you are and I am as well. I mean, we're doing a podcast about a game that's several years out. We obviously are biased in this case, so you have that level of, I guess, fantasy, or those rose-colored glasses. But
I think that there was a couple flaws with it, that, overall, in terms of like the someone that's a veteran like MMO player will obviously pick holes in it right away, but doing it one time and getting to experience, it's like, okay, I can see what this can do. Like that's the kind of thing. It's a teaser.
Yeah.
It's really just a teaser, even though it was a 10-minute teaser. So, a lot of people, just asking people about it, had a really good time with it. Specifically because of the GM-led environment of it and having them help tell the story, because there was only a little bit of text dialogue at the very start. It doesn't tell you anything beyond that, and the various different people that were helping to run it, did a really good job of explaining like what's happening with the world, with the corruption, and showing why this is different here, and explaining the differences between why the ranger can use the track ability and all that kind of stuff. So it was definitely a very crafted experience for the event. And overall, if you're thinking about in terms of like the percentage, 10%, I would say that's probably really accurate in terms of like what you'd expect to see from like a dungeon run in the long game. If that's 10% of the whole, what can happen in the other 90%? So keep that in mind.
And I know it's hard to see if you're just watching this video, you're not going to see, but I know they had a basic quest log, which my face is covering right now. But the basic quest log was, it was generic. It was something that was just thrown in like, go to town, whatever. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah.
But I know they showed off a couple big things in the PvE right off the bat. Like one of the first things, like 3 minutes ago when this video was looping, they were showing like a gathering. People were gathering inside a cave. That was kind of neat. And then they showed how doing that would push experience to node, because then you got that server notification that the node has increased to a different level. And then they showed off a basic caravan run, which, I mean, it's a PvE experience that, if anyone who's following the game knows, caravans also come with PvP implications. Man, even I'm stuttering tonight. It's late. It's really late for us. So I'm staying up. It's like 2:30 in the morning for me at this point. But because I'm East Coast. But yeah, like they showed the caravan run, and leading up into the cave that actually showed off the boss battle, which, was obviously scripted, as most PvE experiences are. But it kind of gives you a nice little overview of a lot of the basic stuff that you'll be doing in Ashes of Creation. There's standard questing in there. You got gathering related items, caravans, and, boss battles. Now, just for my own curiosity, I know you mentioned that, like, there were several issues with the demo that veteran MMO players would find. What were those? I mean, obviously, this is going into it with the idea this is pre-alpha. It's very unfinished. I'm just curious what you think were the issues and what you think they will do to change those or rectify it once the game is launched.
Right, so like they forcefully put that every class will have to use their like ability, like their natural ability, just to showcase them. Like if that's in every single dungeon in a way like that, it might be kind of like, oh, okay, like we have to have every single class to do this correctly. Okay, like that's kind of like, it's like forcing down our throats the composition thing, which I think is a concern for people. Is that, you know, they want these like a full class group thing, which I don't know how well that's going to turn out in the long run. I think they just need to do more role-based stuff. Hopefully some other classes can tank in a fashion. That's kind of like, that's a whole other topic, but because the content was forced to, so you can see the, you know, touch base on all of the different things.
Yeah.
Veteran MMO players will be like, well, you know, it's a good hint, but I want to see more. Like, and that's kind of like, I think what a lot of the really experienced people will be like, well, the boss battle was cool, but we didn't fight like any, like, we only fought this basic encounter. It had like a, you know, a swipe, a breath, a little heal thing. Like, it wasn't like, what's the depth to the game going to be like? You know, if you can go wild with your imagination if that was like, you know, 10% of what the encounter could be like in the long run. So like getting some more confirmation on what their intentions are will help solidify the idea into reality versus it being just something that we are imagining and wanting to be true versus what they're expecting to deliver. So hopefully over time we'll get some more blogs on what their intentions for PvE will be, etc., things like that. The overall usage of those mechanics. So like, you know, for example, the cleric, you walk up to the thing, it's got this big green ball of gas, and you press the ability, and it goes away. It's like, that's really basic. You know, like the mage one was kind of cool. Like you walk up, and the little things pop out of the water or whatever, and turn. The ranger one was kind of cool. It showed the little path. The tank one, I don't really think it did much. Like it is like, okay, detect threat. Okay, I see the monster. It's there anyways. You know.
Well, and I think Thais and I talked about this briefly when we talked about the PAX demos skills when they were released. One of the games, and a single-player game that came to my mind, was, I know the idea of the eight slots, which I'm a fan of, don't get me wrong, but the idea was one of every class, you know, would give you a fully outfitted adventure party. But it doesn't mean you couldn't do it with less. Like you mentioned, the cleric, where I see the green gas. It's funny you mentioned it. It's on the screen right now. It just got cleared away. And the mage thing that you said earlier, where they were going over the water and they pulled it up. They just need to provide other options that if you have the right layout, like not every dungeon has to have all 8 of whatever it is. But, you know, if you have a mage, okay, you get to cross this chasm a little easier. If you don't, you got to go down into the water, fight some monsters, and go back up the other side.
Right.
If you don't have a cleric to dispel the miasma, well, then you have to walk through it, and then walking through it, there's a low-grade damage over time effect on you the entire length of that area. So then you're sitting there going, well, if we could dispel it, we wouldn't have to worry about it, but now we do, so we always have to watch our health because it's constantly ticking down. There are ways around that, and a game that made me think of this was Baldur's Gate 2 for like the PlayStation. I don't know if you've ever played that or whatever, but there were multiple different classes, and at most you could have 2 people playing. It was, you know, back in the days of the old PS2 or whatever. But depending on which one you had, they could do different things. And I specifically remember the Dwarven Rogue character could pick locks, excuse me, and disarm traps. And there were ways around it. If you got to a locked door, you just had to find the monster that was carrying the key. But if the Dwarven Rogue was there, he's like, yeah, I can just pick it, you know, and you could skip that step. Same with the trap thing. There were a few rooms with traps that if you had the Dwarven Rogue, he could disarm them. If not, you just had to run through and hope you didn't die. I mean, you could get through it, and I hated playing the Dwarven Rogue, and I don't really remember too many of my friends who liked playing it. So more often than not, we just were like, okay, this hallway is full of traps. Run and heal, guys. Run and heal. You know, that kind of deal. Like, there were ways around it, but there were ways to make it easier as well.
Right.
So Yeah, I'm fine with that level of thing. Because as long as it's not a dead hard requirement,
Right.
that's where you get into that meta where, okay, oh, Telchar, let's go run the dungeon. Well, I don't play a mage, you don't play a mage, and we can't cross this chasm if we don't have a mage, so we're not running this dungeon. You know, that's a level of issue. It should be something that is just harder if you don't have what it is, the special out of skill.
You have to kill more monsters, make the run longer, something like that. You know, it's definitely it's a difficulty increase and then a convenience to just do it fast with the other way. You know, it adds a level of complexity to it to not have that certain component into it. And I think that's what they're going to intend in the long run. I just want to, what I would like them to do in the next 6 months is start to get a lot more dev blogs out about design mechanics and put them into stone versus just being maybes. You know, like we need to start cementing in at least first revision concepts on stuff now that we have seen that this is not a vaporware product. You know, it's a real thing that they're working on, and they've proved it by their efforts.
Yes.
That's really the critical thing for me, is just seeing how they go from what they have now to try to reach their goal. And that's what I think everyone's willing to give them time to do and, you know, continue just to wait on. But that's what the nitpicky people will find, is the little issues like that in the current thing, and expect, you know, some people will draw the conclusion, oh, this is what the game's going to be like at launch. Probably not. Like, give them some time, you know. So that's you know, my thoughts on the experience itself. So
right, and I know, like you said, with the dev blogs, things that we've been talking about but have never been set in stone, and the boss encounter is up right now on the screen, and it's a perfect example. Like, that showed a cutscene of the thing crawling out of the wall or whatever, and that begs me to wonder, you know, obviously Ashes of Creation is being designed as open world. Like, they don't want instances, or as few as possible, but that's something like that you mentioned with the boss of, okay, it's kind of simple. It had a few basic things. Was this just for the demo? Or is this a restriction of the technology being used? Because without any kind of instancing or phasing type technology, it's harder to do those more elaborate mechanical fights, because, well, anyone could just run in and cheese the mechanics without being able to lock out people or, you know, prevent outside interference or whatever. So, you know, someone sitting outside the room with a healer bot and just spamming extra heals because they can. Like, those are reasons why instances for bosses exist. And I know that was a question that we brought up, and they've been kind of non-committal on it because they want to make the world as open as possible, which I am 100% for. But I am of the impression that boss rooms and stuff like that should be instanced in a PvE encounter, just so that you can control the amount of players in there, as well as tune mechanics based on the fact that only 8 people are going to be in here at a time, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. That's definitely, I think, what's going to end up happening in the long run, especially with feedback from the broader community. So they're very open to suggestion, and they want feedback from where they can get it. The kind of dilemma and the difference is right now is that there's not a really good channel for that at the moment. And anyone that's concerned about the lack of ability for them to communicate with us, on Discord, they've been real quiet lately, is that they've been busting ass trying to get this done. And kind of let y'all know, they had to stay a day later at the office to get the build done, and missed the day of setup that they could have done on Wednesday. So they didn't actually get there until Thursday in the morning, late. So they were trying to get this, they got this done last minute, just to get it here on time. So definitely, hopefully they will give us some more, come back to us and start talking again. The last 2 months they've been pretty absent, it seems like, but that's for a reason. So
right. And I'm of the impression that I love feedback. Feedback is great, but they need to stick to their core concepts and not change based on feedback, not change completely based on feedback. They can tailor what they were designing, but a lot of us back the game based on what they told us they wanted, their vision that they showed us right off the bat. If they start going back and going, all right, we're going to make this completely instance now because, people were complaining they don't like open world. So everyone's going to be instance. As soon as you walk out of city, it's just you, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you that's not the game I backed, right?
Right.
We fell in love with the vision that they showed us during the Kickstarter. So while feedback does help them refine ideas, I hope they don't go nuts and just listen to everyone who's complaining. Because here's the thing, especially when the game's out, the people who are complaining, the people who are taking the time to complain about things aren't playing your game anyway. The people who are happy with it are in there playing it, and they're not on forums and stuff like that. But I know people are saying about feedback. When the game is in alpha and people are playing in alpha, that is when the game is most in flux, because they'll have the bare bones, but they'll be making those changes. And a lot of times they'll have dedicated private forum threads and stuff for alpha builds. And that's where, it's not hidden among all the chatter of all the random people out in Discord or out in the forums and stuff. It'll be contained to a specific thread going, okay, this, Telchar, you and I are in alpha, whatever, 5. I don't know. And they're like, here's what we're doing in this build. This is what we want you to test. Please provide your feedback. And that's where you go. And the devs will be reading that thread. So that level will be there.
I think there's a word difference between feedback and suggestions. Mm-hmm. So like feedback is more like rotating and kind of working with what is presented, whereas suggestions is like, here's my thoughts on this versus, so it's kind of like what I would do differently kind of thing. So
I don't like fantasy. Make it steampunk. That's a suggestion, know?
Yeah. So they're definitely willing to try and make things happen to, if enough of the community outpours that, hey, this is really bad, like it needs to be fixed. After enough attempts, we just need to table the concept. They're definitely going to try to help us out. Not shove something down our throats that isn't going to be loved, perhaps because they are, they may be, biased in their opinion, but they haven't seen what the broader audience has been able to bring to the table. And from, just my suggestions to them, because they don't have this kind of stuff yet, they've been really receptive to ideas and things like that. So over time, now that they're actually going to start working on the creative process of actually making the game in its whole, the suggestions are value when necessary. Like constant suggestions is pointless because then we'll never get anything done. But when a problem exists, you give a lot of feedback. You can also add a suggestion and say, here's my thoughts on how this could change. And it might be a light bulb moment. Like, oh, that's actually really good. The kind of comparative analysis of looking at the different thoughts and perspectives of people out there is really good for the developers of games to think about, because they have a real closed window of what they are able to see, and the horse blinder mentality. They're only able to see what the office has provided and what they've been working on. They may not actually consider, oh, actually that is a really important point kind of thing. So keep that in mind, that my experience with them is that they are extremely responsive to both critical, feedback and suggestions at this point in the game. So,
absolutely. All right. Well, I mean, the only other thing that was really exciting that I wanted just to mention and kind of squee over for a little bit was when they released their introduction video for PAX West, kind of showing off everything. We do now have an official announcement date for Alpha 0, which is the earliest public alpha, which is contained to raffle winners and those people, the people who won the keys and stuff like that. So Alpha 0 starts on December 15th, give or take. So we'll say December at this point. I hate doing the exact 15th because you never know at this point. But December, they have a target date. So that was something that really excited me. And I know a lot of us have been asking about when the first public alpha is. And they've been saying, Q4 of 2017. So it's nice to actually see a date. Were you expecting this?
Yeah, I think that was obviously we needed to see what they were able to deliver at PAX, and that validated my thoughts on what they had kind of leaked out to the community over time. And I think over various streams they had said what their targets are, and the fact they were able to hit this target, I'll even say beyond what they probably expected, because we had no. I don't know if anyone expected this level of what they were going to deliver. I didn't. I thought it was going to be just a kind of little basic, simple experience, but it turned out to be a lot more deep than that. And the next 4 months of their time is going to be about getting the actual like hard kind of like creative design stuff started, so that they can actually give us something to use in that alpha. So hopefully over the next couple pub streams that they do, and then the leaks that they give out, they're going to kind of show us that process of what they're doing, of what they're trying to deliver, like, give us a new kind of benchmark of what they're trying to give us by the Alpha Zero. It doesn't have to be like content. It just should be like, hey, we're trying to give you one level. We're trying to give you one town to go work with. We're trying to go do this. And then, if they hit that if they hit that, and then the expectations are met, then we can kind of probably suggest internally that if they give us an idea, they're not just speaking out of their ass. They're trying to actually give us a realistic estimate of what their timeline is, which you can draw out to the long run, the full, hey, game's coming out by Q2 2019. Okay, like, I believe you, So, right. But.
Yeah. And, I mean, I guess that's going to be kind of the end of this little recap for these first 2 days. Obviously, we're recording this at 2:41 a.m. on Sunday, September 3rd at this point. I say tomorrow because I still haven't slept yet, but when I sleep and wake up, the big panel that they're going to be a part of is going to be on Sunday at, what time again is that? Is it
12 local? So
okay, so 12 PST, so that would be 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time if you live in the U.S. Please do the math if you're in some other part of the world, because I'm not going to sit here and do every single time zone. Sorry, it's just not going to happen. So that's going to be really exciting, and I know Telchar will be there, and I know we have some other people from DCN as well as some other places that will be coming on a later show to talk about, I know specifically that panel, because I know we'll want to go over that, and we'll have a few other little tidbits and stuff for you. So before we wrap up, Telchar, do you have any shout-outs, things like that, where people can find you, guild shout-out, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so thanks to all the guild guys that have been trying to talk to me right now. It's really hard to get any communication inside of the arena. Basically, the internet shuts down in there. So all the guys that have been tagging me, I try to respond when I can. But thanks for trying to help out in the Twitch chat and keep everything going. I know you guys have been working hard on the side where you can. For anybody that's kind of tuning in and seen me a few times now, please feel free to check our guild out, sonsoftheseven.shifter.com. We're also working on our own standalone site right now at sonsoftheseven.com. You can check out the preview of that. Me and one of my guildmates is here right now, and we're hoping to try to make all the events that we can and, be a really active part of the community. So,
yeah, and you'll definitely see Telchar on further shows because, like I said, he showed up one time and now he's committed forever. I don't know if you realize that. You didn't read the fine print, but guess what? No.
That's fun, man.
Yeah, so I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. I know I was one of those people you were like messaging whenever you had data or cell signal so you could, get stuff out because we were talking about this. So thank you so much for coming out and doing this little post recap for us for the first couple days of PAX West. Of course, you can follow everything we do, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com, youtube.com, facebook.com, twitch.tv/dungeoncrawlernetwork. All of our links are in below, and I'll also have links to Telchar's guild website in the description of this podcast. So I really appreciate everyone coming out. Stay tuned because we will have more things from PAX West, and we hope we will see you in Ashes of Creation. See you later, everybody.